Hi, my name's Alex Russell, and I work with the Experimental Gambling Research Laboratory. I'm based in the Sydney campus, and I wanted to show you some of the things that our group has been doing with Qualtrics. So, a lot of people use SurveyMonkey for their own, survey needs, and SurveyMonkey does the job for a very basic survey. But we quickly ran into limitations, and we do some pretty complex online surveys these days. We found Qualtrics to be incredible, and it's actually opened up some really cool options for us that haven't otherwise been possible. So I wanted to talk you through a few of those examples to start off with, to show you the kind of things that can be done in Qualtrics. And this is just a tip of the iceberg kind of thing. There's a lot that you can do, and these are things that can't be done in SurveyMonkey. So I'll talk you through those things, and then I'll show you how to set up a survey and set up an account in Qualtrics. So I want to give you an example about when we quickly read into limitations with SurveyMonkey, and I've got this Word document open over here to sort of talk through. This was a structure of a survey that we were working through, and we had an initial block of questions there, block one, where we gave people the information statement and we asked for their consent, and all participants had to fill that in. We then had some questions on gambling behaviour. Again, we wanted to know that for everyone. And then we had a measure of problem gambling, which is a 9-item questionnaire. It's a very standard thing that we use. And we found, and again, we wanted to ask everyone that. But based on the scores there, we wanted to ask only problem gamblers about any help seeking that they've done for, dealing with their gambling problems. The issue with that is that the problem gambling severity index, this problem gambling measure, needed to be scored in the survey. And at the time, and certainly as far as I'm aware still, SurveyMonkey doesn't allow you to easily score a survey. I worked out that if you programmed every possible combination of answers within that 9-item questionnaire to direct people through, you'd have to actually calculate about 260,000 lines of code within a survey just to make that work. And that was never going to work for us, obviously. So because we couldn't easily ask this block of questions about help seeking only for problem gamblers, we kind of ran into problems very early on with SurveyMonkey. Instead, we found that in Qualtrics, it was really simple to do. I did reach out to SurveyMonkey support, and they said, sorry, our hands are tied. We can't promise if we will bring in such a feature. And like I said, as far as I know, nothing has come in. So just that simple idea of only asking certain people based on a scale, a measure that we need to score within the survey, wasn't possible in SurveyMonkey. And so we looked elsewhere. We found Qualtrics, and we've been really happy with it since. Now, I'll show you a few examples of some of the more complex things that we've been doing in Qualtrics, but I just want to point out something really early on. If you're looking at signing up for Qualtrics, this is the regular Qualtrics webpage. Don't go here and sign up for a free account. The school actually has a license, and if you go to this address here, so CQU, SHHSS, the old school name, it's a bit hard to change that now, au1.qualtrics.com, you get to this login page instead. Just click here, don't have an account, and you can follow the steps through in terms of setting up an account. If you run into any problems, I'm the brand manager for Qualtrics at CQU, and I can help you out, so do feel free to reach out via email. Just to note here as well, the license is a school-level license. It won't work for everybody across the uni. It's only for HMAS at the moment, but it is for everyone in HMAS, and that includes undergrad and honours students. So feel free to sign up. We have unlimited license spots. Unlike with SurveyMonkey, we can only have so many users at a time. With our Qualtrics license, we have unlimited license spots and unlimited surveys that can be running and everything. It's a great license. So I want to show you a few examples of some surveys we've been doing, and I'll just pull over a PowerPoint from my other screen. Here we go. So this is an example from an honours student who actually programmed a working pokey within a survey. So again, we had this idea of a survey of being this really basic thing where we just collect information and then calculate, data and analyses. after the fact. But what if we can do some really complex things like run a pokey? So Qualtrics offers JavaScript extensionality. So, anything can be done with JavaScript, and there are a lot of JavaScript pre-programmed things available. We found this pre-programmed pokey, and we created two versions. One that has like the standard interface, credit and bet and win, and another one that has separate parts of the interface that helps you keep track of what you're spending. So you can see the two versions below. And actually we found that, this better interface, this more comprehensive interface makes people stop betting on the pokies earlier, because otherwise people just bet until credits are zero. So that's just an example of something that can be done within a survey now. And that's great for honours in particular, because it means that we can, run an experiment. People were randomly allocated to these conditions. I'll show you another example we did. We were looking at these things called wagering inducements, which are things that gambling companies put out to try and get you to bet, more money, or when you don't want to try and make it look like your risks are lower. So we wanted to get people to actually bet on an AFL match. We also had cricket and soccer as well, if that's what you prefer to bet on. And you can see there were different options here, just a team to win outright, in this case, the Saints versus Demons, one team to just win outright, didn't matter how much they won by, but then also at higher margins to win by 25 or more points and to win by 43 or more points. So you select one of those. And we wanted the matches, say the Saints versus Demons was one, but another one was like the Swans versus Gold Coast, for example. We wanted those things to be randomized with the different inducements, because we didn't want the inducements to be related to any one single match. And again, we were able to do this. And then we showed them some videos of some footage of a match, actually Xbox footage. So I played Xbox for a week, and that was my job, which was, total scam. But anyway, and we got some great results out of it again. And that's because Qualtrics has this thing, which I'll show you in SurveyFlow, called a randomizer, which means that you can run true experiments in Qualtrics. And so we're doing a lot of that now. So those are just some of the things that we've been doing, but there's much more that we're now learning and exploring. So we've realized that our limit in terms of programming functionality is more in our heads than in the platform. So we can do all sorts of things. So what I'd like to take you through now is to show you what it looks like to set up a survey within Qualtrics, and just show you a really basic example, maybe something with some randomization, to show you the building blocks of working in Qualtrics. So if I go and log in here, so, let's say you sign up with your account and get that all sorted, and then you log in, the first thing you'll be taken to is a list of your current surveys. In this case, I was actually already in a survey. That's when I quit. So if I just go back to the Experience Manager level, here we go. Here are all my surveys. I've got 74 surveys that I've worked on. Some of these are working versions of a survey that didn't go live. And I can have folders of surveys here too. So I've got, for example, for a life course project that I did, which was a really complex survey. We developed some great programming for this that we're now using in subsequent surveys. I've got various versions of the survey that I tried. And I ended up using this short version of one, and we got 2,300 responses through, which was lovely. Chris Byrne is the one who did the pokies one. So let's just click in and show you what his looks like. Here are the questions that you write. You can include, headers and images and things like that. The info sheet, here's my consent button. I agree to participate in the research. And then, all these little bits and pieces of the survey. So here is this problem gambling. Here is just gambling in general, like a gambling history question set up as a matrix table. Here is gender, male, female, other, and then the option to write in some answers there at the end if you've chosen other, to help us understand more if it's relevant. Main language spoken at home, English versus other, and various other questions through here. And here is pokies. So there's some things here about where randomization is kicked in, and he's randomizing people either to the standard interface or the informative interface, we called it. So that's what a survey looks like. Let's go and actually set one up. So if I go back to my Experience Manager thing here, and I'll just create a project, a blank survey project, and I'm going to call this example talk, right? This is my example that I'm doing with you. It'll just take a second. It'll click through to a new page, and we will start setting up this survey. So here we go. We'll get into it, and there's nothing set up just yet, and there's even a little guide over here to help you through if you're not sure what to look for. Now, I'll talk you through help as well in a minute, because Qualtrics has some really wonderful help options, and they also have phone support, which is included as part of our license. They're really happy to answer any questions over the phone, and they're absolutely lovely. One more thing to mention as well is that they have servers in Australia. So all of our data is stored in Australia, which, you know, solves any problems around ethics and data storage and things like that as well. So something to be aware of. And of course, you know, security is their biggest thing. So there's a lot that we like about Qualtrics here. So here's a question block. So here, if I hover over where it says default question block, I can click on that and I can give this block a name, which is going to be useful later. So I'll call this info and consent. You can call it whatever you want to call it. And here is my first question. It's got some sample text in here. Now I might make this my info sheet, right? So again, where it says Q1, I can call this info sheet. Usually best to just call these variables one word as much as possible. And that is actually how that variable will be downloaded. That's what it will be called, info sheet, when we download this data later. Now, for the info sheet, I just want to display some text to them. I don't want to, you know, necessarily ask them any questions yet. A consent question will follow. But here is where I can change the question type, and it's pretty obvious it says change question type. So if I click on where that little down arrow is, there's lots of options here. So descriptive text, or I can add a graphic, or matrix tables, and sliders, and hotspots on images, and all sorts of things. There's some really cool stuff in here. I want to use descriptive text, and when I hover over it, I can see that there are some options in terms of plain or rich text. And it doesn't matter which you choose. You can do plain text and then make it rich text later. It's okay. So here you can just, when we, you know, create our info sheets for ethics, you can just copy and paste it in here. And often most of the formatting, like bold and underline and everything, will come through. Sometimes things like dot points don't work out that well, and you can, you know, change things later. But you can just type in your info sheet here. So, you know, study title, you know, whatever we're going to call it. And you can also include graphics in here too, if you want. So here you can click on Rich Content Editor, and I could add in the CQU logo, for example, if I want. So there's a thing up here to insert a graphic, and I have some in my library, graphics that I've used before, and there's my logo ready to go. I can center that if I want as well, no problem. Make that bold, you know, and add whatever you want. So this study involves, add all the text there that you need. Okay. So there's my info sheet. Now I need to create another question under it. I can create a new question by clicking on this thing here, or I can click this little plus thing, which is great if I want to add questions in between ones that are already there. This one is going to be consent. So do you consent to taking part in this study? You might change the wording depending on whatever ethics is approved for you. And you can see here, it kind of gets the idea that this is a yes/no question, and it's trying to give you some helpful answers. You can, you know, change how many choices are available, and you get to yes and no. So number of choices available over here. There are certain pre-programmed ones in here that you can choose too, which can be useful, but often you'll just want to go with, you know, typing your own things in. So again, you can just click here and make this no if you wanted that to be the other way around, and the next one yes, and then just delete that. Now, something a little bit useful here as well for you is that we want to be able to specify how these are coded. Now, for me personally, I normally like no and yes variables to be coded as no equals 0 and 1 equals yes. That's just the way I like my variables. You can do your variables however you want, but here's how you change it in the survey. So this gear icon gives you options to do all sorts of cool things, and one of them is to recode values. If I click on this and click these two checkboxes, That's how they're coded. So at the moment they're 1 and 2. I'll just change them to 0 and 1 and close. And that's how they'll be coded when I download my data. I'll show you downloading data in a minute. So I finished with that block. That's my info and consent block. I want to add a new block here. All right. Now this might be screening questions. Okay, so this might be some questions where, sure, they might have consented, but we need to work out if they're the right kind of person for us. So we might ask, what is your age? And for this question here, we'll change this to age. And, you know, we could use a drop-down box if you like, or we could use, let's try a text entry question here, because this is a really nice example. So let's say we want 18 plus only. What'll happen now is they'll be able to type in this box, and they could type anything at the moment. They could type words, they could type a small graphic novel if they like. But we want to change this to make it so they can only answer with numbers, because then it will be consistent entry throughout. We don't have to play with the variable later. So I'll click on content validation over here, and I'll click on number. And I want the minimum number that they can enter to be 0, the maximum to be 100. We won't accept any ages above that, and just 0 decimal places. Now, importantly, they can ignore this question at the moment. So we'll click on force response. And we'll do that for consent as well. It's usually good to make it force a response. And if they try and get through the survey without actually recording an answer for a question, that can still count as a valid response for you. So this will minimize missing data. Whether that's appropriate or not for your data is up to you. So some questions are pretty personal, things like income or, you know, sexual behavior or whatever you're asking. And you might want to think twice about making them forced responses, or give them a, you know, do not want to say or no response option. But at the moment, this means that they need to answer between 0 and 100 and no decimal places. So what we haven't done yet is screened anyone out who's below 18. So there's a thing here called skip logic. Now, SurveyMonkey offers skip logic. This is pretty important for many of us. So I can click add skip logic, and I'll say if age is less than 18, I want them to skip to the end of the survey. And that's it. So at the moment, anyone who says less than 18 for this will be kicked out of the survey. We'll go to the end of the survey, won't be asked any more questions. And then you can add whatever other screening questions you want and screen out as well. So I'll give you another example. This is something that we might do in terms of gambling behavior if we want regular gamblers. Let's say we want regular sports bettors. So how often do you bet on the following things? We'd probably word the question a little bit better. And for this one, I'll make this a matrix table. So never in the last 12 months. I'll just change this. How often have you bet on the following things in the last 12 months? And I really might want to make that in the last 12 months stand out. So I'll make that bold. All right, that's looking a little bit better. You could make it red. You could do whatever you want to do. So never in the last 12 months, less than once a month, and so on, you know, and add whatever other options you want in there. And so let's say more than once a month. All right, and that'll be it. We want people who bet on sports at least once a month. And we don't really care what else they bet on, but we want to kind of hide the idea of what we're asking for in this question. So pokies. And I'm at the end of my table here. Whoops, and I can't type. But if I just hit enter while I'm in there, it'll give me the next option to work with. So sports, race betting, pokies, you know, lotteries, instant scratch tickets. Ugh. There we go, that's better. Bingo, Keno, and so on, right? Plenty of other options there. And we want to, in this case, screen people out if their answer for sports is not once a month. So sports, more than once a month is not selected, skip to the end of the survey, right? So you can do is not selected or is selected. So if this one isn't selected, and it doesn't matter what they say on any of the others, if this one isn't selected, they skip to the end of the survey. And of course, you can set up multiple skips here as well. You could add another one. for this too, where if they don't select this one, if you wanted race bettors as well, so if race betting more than once a month is not selected, skip to the end of the survey. Now, at the moment, these things are either of these will kick them out of the survey. So we want to make sure that the way this skip is set up at the moment, they would have to select more than once a month for both sports and race betting. So we want to consider about whether that's appropriate. If we want to get rid of that race betting one because we don't think it's appropriate anymore, you can just remove that skip logic and it's gone. All right, so I'll change this to be like gambling frequency. And let's go in and have a look at recode values here as well. And now I also have the option of changing the names of these things. So frequency of sports betting is going to be a single variable that comes out called GamFreak1. I can change that to GamFreak Sports. Next one, GamFreak Race, GamFreak Pokies, and so on. All right, so you can go through and you can, edit how your data is going to look as it goes. All right, now let's say we want to do something with some randomization. Okay, so we're going to add a block here and we're going to have our pre-questions. We're going to do a thing where we ask people questions beforehand, show them one of 3 videos, and then ask the same questions afterwards. All right, so questions beforehand, show them one of 3 videos, same questions afterwards. We want to see if they change. So I'll have a block here where I ask them the same questions in advance. So, this question might be, it could be a scale. It could be like the big 5, personality, inventory, or whatever it's going to be. So you put in the text here for the big 5, or it could be, whatever's appropriate for you. It could be the PGSI. Okay. So it depends on, things that you think can be changed. I'm not saying the big 5 or PGSI can be changed by a simple video. Maybe let's do something like stigma. All right, so this is a stigma thing, which again is something that another one of my honours students has done. We might ask them some scales about stigma, all in this question block. I'm not going to spend time writing them out now, but now we want to add our videos. Okay, so this is video 1. This can be my control. All right, and I'm going to add a question in here. And what you're able to do here is actually drop a video in from YouTube. So you can host videos on YouTube all that you like. And there are, various types of ways of getting it in there, but you can just embed a video easily enough. Now, I think it's actually it's not in graphic, but it is in here somewhere, and I've forgotten. So I'm just gonna pause. All right, actually this is a really nice example because now I can show you Qualtrics's help. Qualtrics embed video in survey. Okay, so if you search for things with Qualtrics at the start, you start hitting their support, and their online support is pretty good. So here we go, insert media, and it'll take me to a page that tells me how to do these things, and also offers some advice around adding these things in as well. So, you can insert media just using HTML. You can add, media from a library if you've uploaded videos, if they're not hosted on YouTube. And of course, the issue with hosting videos on YouTube is they can be removed and things to be aware of. Or you can post things from, various other places. So adding media using a URL. So you can just go into Rich Content Editor and more and insert media from a URL. So that's how we do it. Okay, so this is just a text type question in here. And so I get in here and I can go, all right, Rich Content Editor, insert media, and I can just paste my YouTube URL in here. Now, importantly, if I want them to watch the video for the whole thing, and I don't want them to be able to skip ahead without watching the video, I can also add a timer in here, which allows me to do things like make it so that they can't submit the page until after, let's say the video goes for 60 seconds. I can make it so they can't submit the page for exactly 60 seconds. I can also make it so that they automatically advance to the next page after 60 seconds. But in this way, the next button won't appear until the video is over. assuming the video is 60 seconds long. All right, so I will have set up one video here. I'll drop in the URL for any video that I want into the text editor there. I'll create blocks 2 and 3, and actually I can just copy these. So delete a block, I'll just get rid of the one that I just started. So I've got this block all set up nicely. I can just copy this block and it'll create a new version of it. This can be video 2, this can be, you know, whatever you want to call it, condition 1, or condition A perhaps. All right, and it'll create a new version. Then I can just change the URL of the other one, update the timer if required, and then I'll create another copy of this block with video 3, condition B. All right, and so now I've got my 3 different video blocks. All right, now at the end, I want to add my post scores. All right, so I'll ask stigma here again. Okay, my stigma scale, whatever it looks like. And so I might call this stigma post, and I might call this stigma pre, and then my data looks all nice and pretty. And now what I need to do is the randomization into the different videos. And this is really easy. So there's a thing up the top here called Survey Flow. And we really like Survey Flow because this is where you can muck around with stuff a bit. So at the moment you can see this is the order of blocks that they're going to go through. Info and consent, and then they'll go to screening questions, and then the pre-questions, the stigma pre things, video 1, video 2, video 3, and then post scores. And at the moment they're going to see all of these videos, but we don't want that to happen. So we're going to add this add below thing here, and we're going to randomize people to see one of the following elements. And I can just move those blocks, those video blocks here. And we'll say that we want them to randomly see one of them. Okay, nice and easy. And we can, you know, make it so that the randomization is nudged a little bit so that they all have equal numbers in them, exactly equal numbers, or we can just let it randomly do its thing. And you know, from a transparency perspective, I suggest doing that. So everyone here see info and consent, screening question, the pre-questions, then one of these videos, and then the post scores. And so that's a pretty good setup with some randomization in there. It's a nice little experiment. Save my flow down the bottom. This question screen all looks exactly the same. The magic is happening up in Survey Flow. Now I want to show you a couple of other things while I'm here as well. There's many other cool things that we like in Survey Flow. So one of the things that I quite like is embedded data. So you know, I would look into that. It's a really powerful thing. I'm not going to go into it in this talk, but look at the kind of things you can do with embedded data. And also survey branches are really wonderful. So embedded data and using that with piped text are some of my favorite things in Qualtrics. And so I can talk about that more in a subsequent video if you're looking at this, or of course you can Google it and Google Qualtrics embedded data and see the kind of things it can do. I'll show you an example of a survey in a minute that uses that. All right, now let's say then, obviously the survey needs a bit of work. I need to add in a lot more text and sort out the pre and post questions and add the YouTube videos, but you can see the structure of it. So what I want to show you now is how we can test a survey. There are some really powerful things in Qualtrics again for this. So if I go to Tools and Review and generate test responses here, I suggest that you set it at no more than 100, but you can run it multiple times if you need more than 100. And what this will do is it'll just run a little script through your survey where basically a little computer program will answer randomly for all of your answers. So at the moment, I've got people screening out at the age of 18. So there are going to be some people here who have an age of 0 or 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever, because it will obey the validation. They're only allowed to say between 0 and 100. It will obey that. And some of them will screen out here, or they should. And I can test if my screen out criteria are actually working. And I can test if there are any problems with any of my questions. So I've run 100 here. I can just run another 100 easily enough if I want 200 or 1,000, because if you've got the kind of inclusion criteria in those screening questions, for example, that are going to rule out a lot of people, you'll want to run quite a few of these tests. But you can see they only take a few seconds to do. So there we go. There's another 100 done, and I've got 200 test data responses in here. Let's go and have a look at them. If I go to data and analysis, this is where I can see what's going on in terms of my data. And you can see there are no responses in progress because no one is currently doing my survey. But if someone was, there'd be some numbers here. And that includes people who have opted out, quit halfway through. There'll be a response in progress for as much time as we let them be a response in progress. You can test how long that takes. I usually leave it for as long as possible. I let people come back to a survey a week later or whatever, unless time is essential. So if it's something like them watching a video and we need to see the effects of that video, I don't want them to be able to quit and come back to it a week later when they've forgotten the video. That's kind of pointless. Now, let's go to actually download data. So click on export and export data. And you can download things as a CSV, either with the choice text. So this would be for consent, the words no or yes, or the numbers 0 and 1. And so I'd suggest you always use the numeric values and add your labels later. Or of course, you can download SPSS data, which has labels and values attached. So we're going to download that. It'll take a second, and I'll open it up in SPSS, and we'll have a look. So that's downloaded. SPSS will just take a second to start for me, but we'll get there in a second and we'll have a look. And of course, you can always import SPSS data into R if that's what you're using, and save those value labels as a separate table that you can refer to later as well. You'll see as well in the background here, the answers have kind of popped up here as well. So there's a bunch of people who didn't consent to taking part in the study, and they're all kicked out. They weren't asked any other questions. And there are some other, this is only some of the questions here. There's obviously a lot more to see. But my actual SPSS data is opening up now, and I'll be able to look at that in a second. So here we go. The data come across with some extra stuff in there. So there are like these unique response IDs. There's the exact time and date that they started the survey, exact time and date that they ended the survey, and you can calculate the difference between them to work out how long they took. There's a thing here, distribution channel, which shows that they're tests. There is the consent question here, so no and yes. And so you can see there's a whole bunch of people here saying no, they don't consent, and they've still been asked more questions. So I obviously didn't set up my consent question properly. So that's good. I can see that in my test data. It's the whole point of test data. And I go back to my survey, and now I can add some skip logic after my consent question, which I should have already had there. So add skip logic. If no is selected, go to the end of the survey. That's it. Okay? So that solves that problem. All of these people here who said no shouldn't have answered any subsequent questions. Here's age. So this person is 9 and they weren't asked any subsequent questions. So that screening is working. This person is 11, weren't asked any. 17, weren't asked any. And then here's my gambling frequency questions. And all of these are filled in, which to me suggests that forced response is not on at the moment. So there might be some missing data in some of those as well. So things to look for. And then we have, these are some timing questions here, and this can tell us which they were put into. So this is when they first tried to click on the page. That'll be recorded even if the submit button isn't available, and it can be useful information as well. But this will also tell us which block they were put into, which video they saw were randomly allocated to. So question 7 was for the control video, question 9 was for condition A, and question 11 was for condition B. You can, of course, add a variable in there which captures which one they were put into as well. But here, this way, you can work it out too. Okay, so we get a feel of what the data looks like, or what the data look like, I should say, and what we can do with it. Now, once we've got all of our survey ready to go, then we need to distribute it. So we need a link. To do this, you go to distributions, and it'll open up a new page here. And there are options. So you can get a single reusable link, which will take us through. It's an anonymous link. Everyone will just use the same link. And it looks like this. It looks kind of long and messy, but of course you can make that shorter using a URL shortening service like Bitly or whatever, or you can use a QR code. So there's a QR code that you can post around the place if people prefer those things. And if you want, you can also add things onto the end of the link so you can customize it. So you could have a different link for people on Twitter and Facebook and Reddit and Whirlpool and all that sort of thing, so you can see where they're coming from. So you would add something like source equals TW for Twitter, and then you can just capture that variable using embedded data. So there's the source equals TW thing. Let's show you how to do that using embedded data. So if I go back to my survey flow, I now want to capture that source information. So I'm going to create a new variable, which is going to be called source, and it's going to be set from the URL. So that is exactly what I typed into the URL, question source equals TW. And for anyone who clicks on a link where source equals TW, that TW is going to be coded in their data in a variable called source. If other people were given a link that had FB, for example, for Facebook, source equals FB, then source variable would be coded as FB. And we can keep track of who's coming from where in that way if we wanted to, for example. So embedded data is quite cool. You can do whatever you want with it as well. You can make a variable equal anything that you like. There are some other, pretty fancy things that we like about Qualtrics as well. There's a lot more to it, really. You can change the look and feel, which is a very boring thing to play with, really. And down the track, I will have a proper CQU template that we'll be able to use. So all of our surveys address the CQU branding requirements. There are survey options here, so you can enable a back button if you want people to be able to go back. That can be a little tricky depending on how complex your survey is. I wouldn't recommend using it, but it's good for testing. And you can also show question numbers here as well. So again, like here where it says info sheet or consent or whatever, that will be shown during preview, for example, where your colleagues can make notes about questions that need to be adjusted. So they might see a question in a preview and go, I need you to change some, and it's this question that I'm talking about, and give you the question name. But I would turn both of those things off when you're live in field. I'll show you quickly, though, what it looks like to preview a survey, because this is a wonderful thing to send to your colleagues once you've got your survey set up. So this is the survey preview. This is what it looks like. Here's my, this is what it looked like for participants. So on the left here is what it looks like on a desktop browser, and on the right is what it looks like on a mobile. So a lot of people do access questionnaires on mobiles these days, so it's really good to see how it looks and what works and what doesn't. So I know that if I say no, I'll screen out now, so I'm going to say yes and go through. Here's the question about age, and if I type 17, well, actually, let's type something other than a number now. It will say, sorry, you need to enter a number, not type it out, right, a numeral. So if I type 18, I'll go ahead. If I type 17, I'll screen out. Here's my next question. Okay, and I can select some answers there. And at the moment, because I have force response now on for this question, it's not letting me go ahead until I answer all those questions. Select what you want. Be randomly allocated to a video now. And this timing thing here, this is just shown to you. I'm just clicking at the moment, right? That'll only be shown to you during previews. That won't be shown to participants unless you want it to be. There's an option to do that. But 60 seconds from now, a next button will appear. And I'm not going to wait for that. I'll move on. But you can get the idea of what a preview looks like. So look, I want to show you one really complex example of a survey, which is this life course survey that I did. This was thanks to a CQU Merit Grant, and it's something that we're using a lot. So here's my full consent sheet. Here's my info sheet. Here's my consent questionnaire. And you can see there's some skips going on and things like that, some basic screening questions. For this particular one, we went into America, rather than Australia because the participants were cheaper, and it allowed me to do some testing of an idea. So then some basic demographics, gender and marital status and all that sort of thing. Now, what we were doing with this survey, and this is the last thing I'll talk about here, what we were doing with this survey is, let me just talk very quickly here, actually. There's a question here which is carrying responses through from a previous question. So there's a previous question here about how often they gamble on, here we go, how often they gamble on all of these things. And we've set this question up so that they'll only see these response options if they've said they've gambled on these things. So if someone told us they don't gamble on slot machines like pokies, they won't be asked about whether slot machines were a form of gambling they spent the most money on. So you have really powerful control over your survey in terms of who sees what and customization. So what we were doing with this survey was a thing called a life course calendar. So a life course calendar is a grid on a sheet of paper where you can draw a line through it. And you're not able to do that in an online survey. So here's what a life course calendar looks like, right? So, for this person here, they wanted to say that they lived in this zip code from 8610 from 1991 through to 2000, and they just draw a line through it, which is a really simple way of responding. But you're not able to do that easily in an online survey. To the best of our knowledge, no one's ever done a life course calendar in an online survey. So we developed some custom programming. So we created a particular type of question. It looks like a matrix table. It's called a side-by-side question because it's capturing a few things. And we wanted to see if these stressful life events, being like fired or bankruptcy or serious trouble with the law or depression and anxiety, those sorts of things, were related to the onset or the cessation of problem gambling, or even just gambling as well. And we wanted people to easily be able to say for each year of their life, whether they'd been fired in that year or had a serious injury or whatever. Now, for most people, a lot of those years are going to be no, but we didn't want people to sit there with a big grid and just have to click every single no, because particularly for older people, that's going to take quite a while. And even for younger people, there's quite a lot of buttons there to click. So what we created was a thing where you could click on the first one and then shift click on the fifth one, for example, and it would automatically fill all of them through. And so I created these screens as an instruction because it's some new ways of responding for people. And we wanted to get to a final response that looks something like this. So for this person here, they could click no for fired and laid off at age 18, and then shift click for no and fired at age 28, and then just change this one to yes. They were fired at age 23, for example. Okay. So we gave them an example one to work with, and we've included some JavaScript programming here to make that click and shift click thing work. If you want the JavaScript programming for click and shift click function in a survey, then I'm very happy to share it with you. We CTU Research Office paid for it, and so I'm very happy to share any of the stuff that we do. Here's where you can modify questions. So this is calling on a set shift click function, which is programmed elsewhere in the survey. It's programmed in a header, and it's saying, I want to call on that particular thing for this question only, because there are other questions earlier on where we don't want that sort of functionality. And here is the big table that has all of these things, and click and shift click works with it. Now this is pretty groundbreaking. And notice here as well, this thing here, this $E field age and all that sort of thing, is actually based on a calculation that calls on their age for the year 1926. So, no one in our survey was alive in 1926, I think. Let me give you a better example. If I scroll down here, let's say someone was born in 1980, like me. In the year 2009, their age would be 29. So what this would look like here would be age 29 : 2009, which served as a memory prompt for people to remember how old they were at that time. And all of these other things here, like whether they were laid off and all that sort of thing, fired from work and all that, also served as memory prompts for when we got over to the questions about gambling and problem gambling. We also asked about drinking and drugs, I want to say off the top of my head. Gambling, drug use, yep, and alcohol use, right? So no gambling, casual or heavy, and we use those terms throughout because we wanted to avoid problem gambling. So that's an example of how complex these surveys can get if you want them to be. And it took us a while to work out the coding on this one. And it took some custom programming, which cost us, a little bit of money to get done, but not much. It was very brief programming. But it shows you the kind of things that are available in Qualtrics. So there are a lot of options here. Now, the reason I'm showing this to you is because I think as honours students, you're all really creative and you can come up with some cool survey designs. And, at the moment in our school, not a lot of people know that we have this option to work with Qualtrics. So I'm going to give some more examples in a broader school talk later on. But I wanted to show you, some really basic ideas on how to build a survey and then how you can do more than just build a survey. So remember, you've got to go to this address here. You've got to sign up with, by the way, when you sign up, you have to use your CQU mail address. You can't, your email address. You can't sign up with a Gmail account under our CQU license because that's how they know you're from CQU and we're not just letting any random sign up. If you have any problems with the signing up process, contact me. If you're having problems with Qualtrics, just Google Qualtrics support. And they're wonderful and they're able to help you with all sorts of things. All right, so hope you've enjoyed this. Catch you out.